Hello, hello, and welcome. My name is Rainier. Some of you have seen me before. I'm usually talking about stuff on this topic. A favored topic, of course. Um, I know I've spoken about autism before to y'all, communication generally, communication in the context of things like autism. Now we're just gonna broaden things up a bit. So today we'll be talking about neurodivergence and communication. So we're going to be looking at how many of us communicate, the world's expectations of communication, expressive and receptive, some quirks, preferences, and thoughts around this, um, and just hopefully things to reflect on. Maybe you see yourself reflected in this. Maybe you could use some of this information, or even just a boost of like, hey, I'm allowed to use some of these tools that are available for me. Many of us, the world is our oyster, and we're like, nah. And we do this kind of thing, which is unfortunately usually a callback to our childhood, where we don't always feel like the adult who can say, I actually don't always have to pick up the phone every single time every single person in the world calls me, or, you know, uh, I don't have to use my weighted blanket as a treat. Like things that are available don't affect anybody. It's almost like it's on a scarcity mindset. I'll overuse it. I'll say it too much. I'll do it too much when really there's no harm. Uh, so we'll get into that. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with me, I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida. I am also board certified in telemental health. I'm an EMDR consultant and a qualified supervisor for those seeking to become an LMHC in Florida. I have been with Pineapple since almost the beginning. So let's get into it, shall we? Sorry about my delay on that. Uh, Technology. Okay, so just quick overview, quick agenda. I know I kind of hit it, just moments ago. We're going to get some definitions. We're going to get some lingo. We're going to get some models and theories about these things. Preferences, challenges. That'll take us through to the end. So I really hope you learned something new. I think that the more we learn about models of communication, the much kinder we can be to each other, the more we can be patient, take a step back instead of this kind of impulse jump, 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 society and attitude that I think a lot of us have most of the time for understandable reasons, but still. Okay, so what is neurodiversity? Pretty much in the name. You probably have heard a number of words. Um, Neurodiverse, neurodiversity, neurodivergence. Some people use more of the cutesy terms of neurospicy, I've used sparkly before. Some people can't stand those labels. Some people like them. As long as it's not hurting anybody, let people do what works for them. At its core, it's an experience based off of differing brain development and relationship to sensory, emotional, and cognitive processing. So the large spectrum of neurodiversity is really most anything. It could be somebody living with OCD. Hi, that's me. Someone with autism. Hi, also me. Um, Folks with ADHD, perhaps folks living with Tourette's, dissociative disorders. There are many, um, many, many, many. Now, some people typically are kind of referencing winking and nodding to more of the ADHD, autism, ADHD experience when they're using the word neurodiverse. it's always okay to ask for clarification when somebody's talking about it and you're like, well, what do you mean? Or what experience are you talking about? Some people use it more blanket statements, some people use it more specifically. All this is, guys, is natural variation in brain functioning. Um, if we go back to old models, around like religious and hyper-medical approaches, it gets very into it's because something is wrong. Somebody did something wrong happened, it's an environmental, like there's just a flaw. This theory that things are flawed. Um, some stuff you can track back to a hereditary line, some things you can track back to an environmental exposure, which almost always is, if not always, not somebody's preference. In the case of PTSD, people don't invite those experiences into their life. It happens. And then we deal with brain changes, or maybe somebody has dealt with brain changes earlier on. Highly recommend checking out the studies around the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale. That one can be very interesting. A lot of people there's some old thoughts about the brain. It's usually either people are not resilient at all or they're very resilient and they'll be fine. The truth usually lies somewhere in the middle when it's probably kids, adults. Okay, so really, neurotypical slash some people use the word neuroconforming. That is more people that perhaps are neurotypical, but these things that neurodivergent people deal with, it also hurts neurotypical people. I've met many people that are not dealing with any neurodiverse conditions, and they're just like, oh, dude, like, why do I have to work in the office, come back, oh, these calls, oh, we have to do these meetings and check-ins, or, I always have to say, oh, we all kind of agreed to something that it seems like most of us don't really like, where it's just like well, I was taught, it seems like it's what's considered polite, part of etiquette, and we roll with it, even though many of us don't want to roll with it. Um, so, you know, yeah, shout out to the neurotypical folks. But yes, it's not. The more time goes on, we see that almost everyone seems to have some sort of diversity of experience. I mean, at the core of it, we're all different people, right? There's other terms like allistic versus autistic. So that's really decentering language instead of saying you know, like, I guess going back to like neurotypicality. Um, so allistic is like using the language of autism. You can see that istic there. So it's kind of like the using of the language from the community instead of centering it around what people consider what is like typical or the norm or the larger group. It's all just language stuff. I'm not saying, I love it. I use it every day. You can like it or leave it. It's just some things, I want to keep, have you keep your ear out for in case you hear it out there. Okay, y'all, we're gonna dig around for a while on this slide, so let's lock into I believe, I hope, because if I can't recognize my own favorite shape, Mobius strip. I believe that's what we're looking at here. That was my intention when I put it specifically into this slide. Kind of because it really, not that anybody's wondering, but because it looks like the infinity symbol, which is kind of a symbol for some neurodiverse experiences, autism, so whatever. It's a cool picture. All right, communication styles. There's a lot to get through here. Obviously, some folks communicate verbally, almost everybody non-verbally, some people written, and a lot of people digital. So verbal, of course, is mostly spoken speech. Um, Nonverbal is going to be those, eyebrow, facial expressions, pursing of the lips, sounds, things like that. That can be, encouragers for somebody to continue, like, or, That lets somebody know something else. Um, written, written can be anything. Written can be drawings. It can be actual, like, written words, stories. It could be poetry. We could go really broad with all of these. Music is communication. I think a lot of us, music lovers would consider that a way to communicate. If you've ever sent somebody a song and been like, this is how I feel about you, or how I feel about the world, or how I'm feeling, it's a way to communicate, right? It doesn't always have to be, I feel this way, specifically because of, and then digital, right? We take many of those forms into the digital world. People can use things digitally like, which we'll get into a little bit more, emojis, emotes, tone tags, statuses online somewhere, things like that that just lets you know what's going on with somebody, where they're at. Um, so what we tend to notice about neurodivergent folks is that there's a more directive and direct sense of communication. It's usually I am sharing this for a purpose, not I'm chatting just to chat. However, there are many neurodiverse folks who do like to chat just to chat. Shout out to more of the extrovert level neurodiverse folks. They are out there, they do exist, and we must not forget them. But typically, if you just look at frequency, then you're going to see more of I'm only going to speak, if I'm spoken to, or I'm going to speak if I have something I need, want to say, got excited to share about. You might get a lot of quietude from folks. It can also be structured, like I'm going to break down this concept step by step. Other times, like I know I'll speak for myself, I think of my brain like a web. I'm not sitting there like, whereas other people might. There's a question on an assessment that's like, do you, have thoughts in your mind like you would flashcards, and you pull one out that relates to what you want to say or talk about. Some people are like, oh, yes, that's me. Other people are like, oh, what does that mean? However, what you'll find with most neurodiverse folks is that everything tracks back to something. Most of the time, it's not truly random. Although it can happen, maybe more so with the ADHDers, where something just kind of bing. But of course, if we were really, really to dig into brain science, it really may not be random. That thought could have just pinged from something way earlier. But the structured way of communication is usually, I got to this point, maybe a couple of side roads are taken, get back to the point. Some communication may be planned. I don't know a lot of people that personally practice this, but again, this is just anecdotally. But I do know folks who plan their communication. Um, and I think many of us do, or we might be like, I really need to talk to blank about how they spoke about my friend earlier, or something that's been on my mind a lot lately that I really need to bring up. Um, but what I'm really talking about here with the planned way of neurodivergent communication is actually planning conversations. Like we are going to sit down and have our weekly check-in chat, or our daily, special interest info dumping, which is basically, hey, here's what I learned about things that I love. Boom, here's all that. You want to swap with me, you share too. And may not always be, kind of on the fly spontaneous. Although I'm one of those spontaneous, like, hey, I was just thinking about, 2010. So again, we're all different. There's some things that you can notice at a large scale in the group, but of course everyone's going to be different. Inclusive. What I hear a lot of folks getting kind of picked at is for their use of inclusive language. A lot of neurodiverse folks will use language that is more like some of that decentering language. It might be more the person first language, which sometimes people love, sometimes people don't. Person first would be person living with autism instead of autistic person. Um, a lot of people like either way. Usually when someone defines themselves, they may not use person first, whatever they may use whatever they appreciate. But then for other people, they may not want to ascribe how that person might want to define themselves, so they may use person first language. You also notice that some people tend to use more neutral language, more like curious language of like, well, I don't know their experience. What I suspect is, or I don't know anything about them, or that was an interesting person on the street, absent of specific pronouns, right? Except for more of a neutral standing point, which of course the person in discussion may not use, but for safety purposes, not trying to ascribe it to anybody. And just general bespoke ways of communicating, which we'll get into, which doesn't everyone really, though. We have our own ways of, joking, humor, etc. Okay, let's get into some of our theories. So, the social model of disability. This is kind of a way where the environment will adapt. Instead of labeling like a person saying, oh, this is a difficult employee, they can't communicate, they're bad at communication, perhaps because they, are not like, hey, here's my thought for the next meeting, or yeah, I'd totally love to volunteer for that. Let me get in on that. Knowing almost the exact attuned right time to jump um, in a meeting. The social disability model is going to not make assumptions. So, for example, if a workplace hires someone who is not that like jumping in, verbal, I'm presenting, I'm answering questions, somebody could look at them and be like, they don't want to be here. They're not an active participant. They don't care. They're a poor communicator. Why did I hire this person? What did I miss, at the interview? Which a lot of assumptions being made. So instead of this push to like, you really need to step it up, which of course is okay if the employee in question is willing, able, if it's necessary, if there's a piece of necessity there, but not to the max of like, that person's going to mimic somebody who's really active and verbal. Um, the company could implement some asynchronous contributions, like usage of a chat, usage of email afterwards, more written stuff, or even a stronger timeline. Like, hey, like, thanks for coming to the meeting, and maybe that employee knows that after the meeting, they can send an email within 24 hours, giving their reflections that will then be all pulled together into maybe the weekly email wrap up of the meeting or something like that. So now it's inclusive. We're not labeling. Great thing to do. Really, you'll notice throughout this an attitude of curiosity and pulling back from ego will do all of us a good thing. This, and we're humans, so we have to fight this left to right. Even people who are more in the know about this stuff, doesn't matter. We're all humans with perspective and, assumptions and all that. Okay, monotropism. I love this word. I love this topic. There's a questionnaire named after it. Really cool. It's a newer questionnaire and getting to identify more so autistic folks, but also ADHDers, because monotropism can be a part of both. So really what it means is single point of interest. So when we're talking about communication styles, some people that are not having this experience of monotropism might get very confused, be like, my God, this person just keeps talking about the same topic. Yeah, I've been on the receiving end of that. Currently, my special interest, which is not going to go away, I can tell, is the band Ghost. Am I putting on songs in the morning? Am I talking about it? Am I showing photos? Am I rewatching the same live show? Yes. Now, I know I don't need to blast that at everyone that I know, um, simply for back and forth. However, it is something that we want to be aware of in others, accept and be kind about. So I know when to kind of push forward, when to pull away as somebody who is monotropic, um, simply, like I said, because of the back and forth. But what I should not have to expect is to shut myself down. And it's, what the hell? Why are you talking about this so much? Not helpful. So, for example, let's say a person with ADHD and OCD gets really into a conversation about something that they have been fixating on recently. Maybe it's going to become a special interest, which most people refer to as something that really has more staying power than a hyperfixation, but we're not going to get into all that wording right now. But finds it difficult to switch topics when someone else tries to change the subject. The important part here is that instead of assuming they're ignoring others, being egotistical, being unempathetic, think of that monotropism. Um, so maybe friends and family that were around, conversation can flow a little bit better. Tools like being like, hey, hate to interrupt. I could tell you're really, really excited, and I love to learn about what you are excited about too. I know I don't know all the language. I know I'm not really exactly familiar with the topic, but it's really cool to see you immersed in something. Now, I know I might have just thrown you off there, but I'm wondering if for my own needs, if we could, if I could swap back something to you, if we could take a break, or if it would be okay to ask questions. And if so, when? Because I'm finding myself at moments wanting to ask more, um, but I know that sometimes when you get into it, you just want somebody to hear you. Other conversations around this could be when we know somebody's going into kind of a single point of like, let me tell you about everything in marine biology and my favorite critter. And you might be like, if I can do that right now, it's okay to share that. Like, yes, I love this topic. Um, I'm not personally in the headspace right now to take in information right now. I'm so sorry. I'd love to check in with you about this. Is there anything that you could do to maybe like get some of that hype out? Um, is there like a documentary? Like, just again, depends on your relationship to people, but trying to identify that most of the time, people, especially when they're talking about something you can clearly see they're excited about, maybe it's sports, maybe it's science, animals, music, that, if they're like, oh my God, oh, and this was so cool, and okay, I gotta tell you about this. Yes, so this is how this goes. But most people aren't trying to railroad you. You might feel like that and be like, I'm never going to get out of this seat. We're always going to be talking about this. Um, and like, how rude. They haven't asked me one question about myself. Like, here we go again. This is what people say, about neurodivergent people. I guess it was right. Blah. Like, we can work ourselves into a tizzy about this. Um, so I just invite you to please don't. And also, us monotropic folks, also be aware of the people that are sitting in front of us, too. Sometimes we gotta, you okay to listen to more? All right. Double empathy problem. I think we're noticing that empathy and kindness and curiosity are really merging around here. Um, so this again goes back to misinterpretation. So somebody might misattribute something, and then that person might misattribute the response as something else, and now we have, if you've ever seen, I don't know that I exactly want to reference this, but I think it might be from Burning Man. Sorry, everyone. And if you like it, well, great. It's kind of this art piece where essentially there's two adults. I think it's like made out of wire, and their backs are facing each other, so they're not engaged. They're not, it's just. But inside of that is like two little kiddos, and they're like in contact. I believe they're like touching fingers and looking at each other. That's kind of how I think of the double empathy problem, is usually most of us want to connect, but sometimes we get wrapped up in our own stuff. Um, so, for example, an autistic student, struggles to understand a teacher's sarcasm. This teacher, as far as we know, is not neurodiverse. The teacher misinterprets the student being very honest as rude, rude and critical. Neither is at fault. Their communication styles are just not gelling. But they can recognize this disconnect, finding a middle ground, using more direct language, talking about this on the side, being like, hey, like, I know sometimes I can be really, ham about something, um, but I respect you, as an instructor, so please let me know, if that's okay, or if you're feeling like the class is suffering, because maybe they're looking at you in a different way because I'm calling things out or saying things in a really direct way, like, well, why would you teach about this when, it's about this? That can sound very like accusatory, like, well, why are you? I'm the expert. Most neurodivergent people, and I'm not saying all neurodivergent people were angels and we never are trying to be rude or are rude, but most of the time when somebody's being direct without any of the preamble fluff or what's called hedging language, which is kind of that preamble-y stuff of like, I hope this doesn't come across wrong. I'm just wondering. I mean, no offense. Thank you. Please hear me out on this. I ask this out of, curiosity and not judgment and other ways. It can sound that way to people, and they'll take it as like, why are you challenging me? And it becomes this like ego beef. Um, and we don't need that. There can be so many beautiful conversations without the ego in the way. All right, and theory of mind. By the way, there's many other, models and theories around communication. I just wanted to highlight ones that I feel like are really cool to know about. So the theory of mind perspective um, kind of also goes to trying to understand just really somebody else's theory of mind, like understanding oneself, really understanding someone else's experience. Um, Many neurodiverse folks struggle with being able to pick up on what is somebody feeling through facial expressions, body language, whereas other people, have been taught to mask and learn very quickly. We have to put other people first. I come last. So everyone's different, but at a norm, most people are, struggling to have that theory of mind about parsing out what might somebody else be feeling. Uh, you know, what do people think I'm feeling? So, like if a neurotypical friend misreads a neutral expression of another friend as disinterest, they might be thinking, okay, they don't care. But really, it could be 5 seconds later, they're going to be like, oh, we'll get into delayed processing. Uh, this is where questions help. We're not assuming lack of engagement and stepping away from the conversation, rolling our eyes, finishing the conversation, but later being like, they're so toxic, they don't give a crap about me. Why do I stay in this friendship? Many people do this. They take something and run. It's just human. Doesn't mean anybody's a bad person for doing that, but we don't have to stay here. So asking clarifying questions. Are you enjoying this topic? Are you okay if we keep discussing this? Do we need a break at all? Um, is there any questions that have come up for you? That can be great. Because sometimes, I mean, this is said for every human being, no matter what's going on with them. Sometimes somebody's just sitting there, they have to go to the bathroom, and they're just making all sorts of faces. And it's just that, right? But we might be looking at it being like, God, they look uncomfortable, or like, and a lot of us are, unfortunately, due to like trauma in society, trained to be too locked in. We catch those micro expressions. That's a safety behavior. It makes sense where it comes from, but my goodness, does it make things harder along the way. Okay, we will keep it moving. All right, so receptive communication. I'm receiving. Um, what might go on here? Well, I think a lot of us are known for being very literal. Questions from autism assessments might be, um, I do not understand what he wears on his heart on his sleeve means, or the phrase, I've got you under my skin makes me uncomfortable. It's really like the neurodiverse brain is kind of able to like almost visualize these things in a unique way, or just kind of conceptualize them, like literally thinking of like somebody beating heart on their sleeve, or like somebody inserting themselves under your skin. I'll discontinue that. So the literality, I think when you're around the right people, um, there can be jokes made out of this. People, in my close community, they'll be like, hello, and I'll be like, oh, right. But I know they're not being rude. Now, I've been around people that are like, really? Obviously, they mean it literally, and it's like, okay, we don't have to make a whole thing out of it. Um, Delayed processing really wraps up in the literality. So somebody taking something at that, like, how did you get here? A car. Not, oh, well, I found this group on a website and I thought it would be really cool to try, right? So just trying to be kind and be like, oh, I meant like, how did you find out about us? Just rolling with it. There's no need to make fun. Um, just rolling with it, right? Explaining further. A lot of people get kind of, well, obviously I meant it like this. It's like nobody knows what you obviously or didn't obviously mean sometimes. So just, this is where language can be really helpful. So let's find our words. I think the more words, the better, the more ways to describe, because things in communication can be really nuanced. Uh, okay, another thing, this is where sometimes going back to the, theory of mind, the double empathy problem, is a lot of times neurodiverse people are really working to be attentive, but other stuff's going on. Visual clutter, literally. Like right now, I see that I did not put up 2 of my weights from working out this morning. And I keep seeing it out of the corner of my eye. I also see my slippers and the cat's mouse, and I'm like, it's not a big deal. Everything else is pretty much put in its place. But I'm like, So stuff like that. So somebody might be, especially if they're in a place that they're responsible for, um, they might kind of look around, or if they're in your place and they are different than you and like how they do things, your, minimalist and maximalist friend combo, they might be like, at stuff. And it's not a judgment of like, too much stuff, get rid of it, but more just like, that looks like something I need to fix. People might be trying to pay attention, but then they're like traveling around, um, and things like that. Same thing with noise. You know, most neurodiverse people struggle with parsing out noise. So just almost kind of having the noise canceling experience. I am choosing to focus. I'm done. It's more like I am choosing to focus. What? A siren is going off. That may, speaking of monotropism, rip that person out of monotropism. They're going to lose that nice snowball effect of autistic inertia and what they're doing. Now be thinking about this and then try to pull the lever back over to what they were doing. This can be similar for communication. So most people are like, why are you making a big deal? What's going on? Not helpful, right? You're like, oh, it wasn't that loud. It's not that bright. It's not that big of a deal. These comments aren't necessary. You don't need to fix whatever's going on always, unless it is fixable in a normal amount of time, like to turn off, some weird sound that's going on. Um, it also has interoceptive needs. Sometimes people, unfortunately, deal with interoception issues, which are understanding your body cues inside. Hunger, need to sleep, need to pee, need to poop, need to this, need to that, whatever. And might, unfortunately, due to those issues, only get the cue after ignoring it a couple times, or getting the cue where it's like, you need to pay attention or you're gonna pee on the floor. Which I know it sounds silly, maybe. There's so many running jokes in the neurodivergent community, especially in autism, where it's like, well, I didn't get the math and science autism, but I got the pee your pants autism. It's talking about those interoceptive issues. And then adaptive multitasking. Many neurodiverse people are able to anchor to something like a show, music, something going on in the background, and actually be able to listen to somebody. But somebody else might perceive that as, you're not paying attention, you're rude, you're, tied up in your thing. Um, Obviously, there can be differences. If somebody's like playing a boss fight and like raiding in World of Warcraft and you're like trying to have a full-blown conversation with them, that might be a little dicey. But if somebody just has like the baby sensory videos on in the background, it's like, yeah, what's going on with you? Um, so it's okay to have, each side, right? For somebody to have their own needs for to receive communication. We all have to be responsible for trying our best to note when things like visual clutter, noise, and our body needs are getting in the way. Then on the other side, receiving benefit of the doubt for not doing that as fast, and we're sitting around looking like, oh yeah, and somebody's like, what's that expression that just passed their face? And really, it's like, oh, I just haven't eaten in 5 hours. Right. Delayed processing too. Um, Sometimes even just waiting 5 seconds. For like, hey, can you get the pizza from the front door? You might be like, hey, yes. Sometimes it's just things like that. Like, we're so used to these speedy conversations, or I've always got to fill the air. Does not do well, really, for most people. Most people would prefer to have slow, easy, calm conversations that lets them put a little more back in the tank. Neurodiverse or not, to be able to say, sit on a park bench, be like, yeah, so what's been going on with your family? Da, 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 da. Oh, what's been going on with yours? Da, 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 da. Oh, cool. Look around at a bird, check out the sky. That's a really nice day. Yeah, I'm glad to be here with you. Right, not the, oh, awkward. Why'd you stop talking to me after you talked about family? So basically, what you see is not what you get. I'm in outer space. Sorry. It's a beautiful picture. I love it. All right, expressive communication. I think we've gotten a good hang of a lot of this down, so I'm not going to run through this one too long. Um, we've talking about spoken versus written. I mentioned asynchronous earlier. So synchronous versus asynchronous is some people are just going to prefer to answer things at different times and in different ways. So for instance, sometimes I might be like, if somebody's doing paragraph conversation with me, I might be like, I am not in the mood to type that type of way. So I might send them a voice memo after asking if it's okay. Um, Other times somebody may be like, hey, I could use an answer on that soon. And I'm like, hey, if you need an answer right now, it's got to be a no or a wait. If you can wait, a day or so, I think I can have a solid answer for you. Or even if somebody has written you a large message, say a friend online, um, and you're just like, "Oh, I love you, but like I can't answer this right now." It's okay, to say, hey, um, don't have enough in the tank to answer you right now. I want to give it love. I want to give it space. So just letting you know, I did see this. Feel free to send me more stuff if you want. I might send you a thing or two, but I'm going to get back to this message as I am able. Cool. Now we're not sitting there being like, oh, you're ignoring me, or this person's going to think I'm bad. And then we get into, I never answered. Echolalia is another thing to just be aware of on both sides, no matter who you are. This is the repeating of something, especially like right after somebody says it in the exact way they said it. So if somebody says, I really like to go to the mall, you might say, I really like to go to the mall. That person might be like, why are you copying me? Especially if you came from a generation that was like, don't copy me. Why are you copying me? Uh, that usually echolalia is almost always like a kind of complimentary. Like I liked how that sounded, your voice, like it was fun. It gave my brain a little tickle, a little like, oh, cool. So just be aware of that. If you're on the receiving end of it, to be like, oh, I'm wondering like what made you repeat that? Oh, I just loved how it sounded. Cool, instead of being like, why are you copying me? Oh, I just right, you know. Scripting, being aware that sometimes when you're engaging with a neurodiverse person, or if you are a neurodiverse person, I'm trying to hit both sides. If you are a neurodiverse person, it's okay to use scripts, sentence starters, certain topical things, ways that we apologize, initiate conversation, invite somebody somewhere. But on the other side, other people receiving scripts, just be aware. Most people are not trying to sound repetitive or anything, but that might help them communicate with you. And as long as they get that communication done and everyone feels good, great. Going back to some of the double empathy stuff, tone. I wish as a world we could just ignore tone. I get it. It all pulls us in and sucks us into its trap. Or if somebody's like, hey, I'm not really sure I liked how you said that. Some people might be like, that was rude. Whereas to me, rude would be like, hey, I didn't like how you said that. That I think, there's tone and then there's tone. Capital T tone and lowercase tone. So if something's like lowercase tone or we're just not sure, ask. It's okay to be like, hey, something in how that was said, it just didn't hit me the right way. I just want to clarify what kind of manner you meant that message in. This is where a lot of people will use things like tone tags, which we might get into a little bit more. Pacing, again, back to the delayed processing. Might be faster, might be slower. AAC means alternative augmentative communication. There are going to be people, especially those that have minimal, no verbal, or choose not to use verbal, um, where there might be pictures and sounds. It will do like text to speech, things like that. So just being patient. And also, feel free to use this, even if you're somebody who can be verbal 80% of the time. Sometimes you're not going to want to be. If you choose to use AAC in a basic app, like there's like visuals to go or emergency chat, that's okay. You're not taking anything from the resource pool. Um, Eye contact, I think a lot of us know that. If we expect somebody to be like woo woo woo, that much involved. Or if somebody's like talking to us and they're like, yeah, I'd wonder how you been. It could be a little disorienting to people that are used to solid eye contact. But again, if somebody's communicating, just try to be kind. Also on the end of the person that's maybe struggling with the eye contact, don't like try to work on the feeling that you have to. Because for many people, it literally feels like painful. It's hard to describe. It's like this, like, ugh, like I want to almost like pull my face back. And then anchoring, which I mentioned earlier, is if somebody's playing with a fidget toy, rocking around, maybe has a song on in the background, low and light. Um, that might actually be really helping that person listen to you instead of being a distraction. So, things that work for everyone. So, buzzing through this one, I think we all kind of got this down now. Um, let's, try not to apply intent to each other. Intent of wrongdoing, intent of rudeness, intent of critical, intent of ego. Um, if you haven't heard of Hanlon's razor, that's a great one. Do not apply malice to that which can be explained by ignorance. That's the OG one, but I always like to add really or anything else. I'm not going to be like bad simply because it just could be a lack of knowledge. It could just be a difference. Really, most people are just trying to do their best. Even people where we're like, whoa, that's a lot. Uh, People often think neurodiverse folks have a lack of empathy. I don't know how to say that that's not as true as people think. There are some neurodiverse people who identify with this in their own unique way. Not as in like, 'cause some people take that as you hate people and want the worst for them. That's not what that means. Just maybe go back to the theory of mind. It's hard for me to understand that experience in that person's shoes. Um, Other people are hyper empathetic. Uh, the ego thing, right? The like, I can't believe you wouldn't look at me when you're talking to me. That's not even what it's about. Of course, other processing disorders can come in the way, and then just optics, which all goes back to the perspective, and visual of like, oh, that person didn't look at me, oh, they made a weird face, they seem to be distracted, they're talking to me and they're like, I get it. It's hard stuff to kind of anchor yourself through, um, but we all deserve to communicate freely and comfortably. All right, and how can we all respect our preferences? Let's listen actively. Active listening is about listening, not hearing. Not jumping to respond as much as possible. It's redirecting ourselves. Sometimes if we know we're popping off, for far too long, we've talked somebody's ear off, or if somebody else needs to, work their way out of a conversation and take a break. An attitude of curiosity, a good old tell me more. I'd like to hear more about this. Where did you learn about this? How did you come across this? What does this mean to you? Asking for options, saying, hey, I'd actually prefer to talk about this over text today or over voice memo. Is that cool? Or actually, I think I need to jump on a video call with you if that's all right. Sharing needs. We all get to learn our needs as time goes on. A lot of us will just try to push through no matter who we are. So let's try to challenge that. But just normalize things, right? AAC, doesn't matter if you think the person needs it or not. Same thing with tone tags, fidget toys, whatever's going on, doesn't matter. If somebody likes it and needs it, it's not hurting anybody, right? So if somebody says, wow, I really love to go out in front of a bunch of people, /S, they mean /sarcastic, so we can take that in that tone. Um, so anybody using these, not just neurodiverse folks, but using tone tags is great. Um, I had a friend learn how to use it and it helped a lot, because I was like, ooh, this always sounds a little sassy, and I was trying not to apply intent. But see, we're all people, no matter what we know, just some stuff hits that way. So just being kind. And last but not least, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, I know sometimes presentations with me can be a wild ride. Um, so I thank you for following along, putting a lot of love into your community and yourself. I've been Rainier. You can reach me right there if you need anything. Um, please be nice. Please give me 24 to 48 hours. Um, and that would be great. And support Pineapple. We've always got lots of great webinars, trainings. If your company needs trainings on things that we can speak to, and just follow Pineapple and keep up with that. They're a wonderful, wonderful part of this adult industry community. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.